Hi, Charlie here. I wanted just to tell you a story to go along with the last video that I did about the power of our words. I wanted to tell you a story about my son, Josh. He had gone into landscaping. He had his own little business, and him and his friend were starting out, and they were doing, really well. And I was watching him just, growing and marketing himself and just being a real straight up guy, like how he talked to people on the phone. I'd catch him when he'd be like answering their questions, and just really kind and very thorough. I was just like I just sat back as a mom and was watching him, and I talked to him about, Josh, just keep doing it, and life will keep multiplying year after year, to whatever you want it to be. And if you're a straight up person, pretty much you can do anything in this world that you want. My kids were all pretty exceptional when they work at restaurants. Micah was a busser, and Josh came in and he was working, I'm not sure exactly what Josh was doing, but everybody liked him. They were down a little local restaurant. And then even my son got a job. Luke, my other son Luke, got a job cleaning the dishes. So they're all just at this job, and just quality people. Not talking on their phones, but actually working. They had really great work ethics. That's the one thing my husband and I did really well at raising our children. We both had that same mindset. We both are very hard workers, and so consequently we taught our children to work and be good workers. So here I am, coaching my son along, Josh, and just coming up beside him and, wow, Josh, I'm so, proud of you. And I love it I love the way you talk to your clients. And every time I'd see something, I'd just really, acknowledge it and reinforce that inside of him. So this one time he got this plant, and it came in the mail. And I was like, oh, this is cool. What's the deal with this? And he goes, well, this, client of mine, they live up in Reno, and they wanted this plant, but it's too late in the season to plant it. And so, I'm going to put it in a pot, and they're going to keep it in their house. And I said, wow, that's cool. Like, how'd you get all that information? Oh, I did all this research, Mom. But they want to grow it inside for the winter, and then I'll go back in the spring and I'll plant it outside for them. So I was like, wow, that's pretty impressive. So one day I went out into the garage, and here's my son. Like, I have to say, I was just in awe of, how much research he had done, and how he took responsibility for the job, and, and ordered the plant. I mean, I was really, impressed with who he was as a young man starting out in his business. So I go out in the garage, and I open the door, and he's sitting, away from me, and he's got that plant in between his legs, and, he's putting dirt around it, and he had just transplanted it into a bigger pot, and he's got his head down. And so I was telling him, I go, Josh, I just want to tell you, like, how impressed I am, and how remarkable of a man you are. And as I was telling him, he was like this. He's like, well, thanks, Mom. And then I just kept telling him more that I had actually thought and actually, wanted to communicate to him. And the more I, did it, he'd just go, well, thanks, Mom. And what I saw as I was speaking these words, I saw in my mind's eye like this picture, pouring words of affirmation over him, and words that were life building. And as I was speaking them over him, I could see it just like, and just going into his soul. And his response was, well, thanks. And it was one of the coolest things I ever saw. And it really gave me a clear perspective of the words that we speak to our children, to anybody as far as that goes, everybody that comes into my path, I'm always trying to see who they are and what they're doing, and I want to like pull that out of them, and I want to pour like life into them, and by my words, and really encourage them into living their lives, and finding their destiny and purpose, and being at the end of it all is being a straight up person, that owns their life and has integrity and kindness. That's one thing about my son Josh. One time I had all these hand warmers in the back of my car. He had taken my car up to Walmart one early evening. It was a really cold night, and here's all these hand warmers. I was like, dude, I got a whole bunch of those in the closet upstairs. You didn't need to buy any. And he's like, oh no, Mom. He goes, I was driving into Walmart and I saw these people waiting, at the bus stop, and he ran in the store and he got a bunch of hand warmers. And when he came out, they were gone. The people had gotten on the bus and drove away. That's my son's heart. Like, all my kids are actually really cool that way. They all see people beyond themselves, and they're aware of life around them. They're not just introverted. It's all about me. They actually have a very outward perspective, and I love that about my children. I think it's the one positive thing that we were able to instill in them, my husband and myself. I had I have more time. There was a guy, he'd come up the road, and he was living in the hills over here. And one of my neighbors down around the corner, they're like, oh, did you know that there's a guy living up in the mountain? And I go, yeah, I was wondering about that. I had kept seeing this guy walking. Well, actually, there was 3 of them that would walk in the early spring, and they were all living up in the hill together. But then all of a sudden there was just the one, and his name's Jeff. And one day I was driving down the road, and we were going to church down at the end of the road there, and we were having a spaghetti feed, so it must have been in August. And I pulled over and I said, hey, you want to come to the spaghetti feed? If you and your friends want to come, it's free, and have some food. And and Jeff's like, no, that's good. And I go, well, where's your friends lately? What happened to them? He goes, they didn't like the snakes, so they left the mountain. But Jeff lived up there for, 2 or 3 years. He lived up there, and then in the winter he would stay at another lady's house across the road, and he'd help her and her husband. They were an older couple, but he'd help around their yard, and by doing that, they allowed him to stay and live there throughout the winter, and then he'd come back in the summer, and he'd live up, on the hill, and he'd bring vegetables for the bunnies and the meat for the coyotes, because he'd collect from the fish or whatever, and he'd bring water up, which is so funny. He'd carry water up to feed the animals when there's a river down the road. But I'm sure that was really nice. And but we had Jeff come over and do some work for us, and paid him to come and work. And he was such a good worker, and he was such a kind man, and just a very kind man. So I think my kids always saw that, to extend yourself to people and to not judge people by where they live or what they don't have. So I've seen that with my children. They're like I said, they're very outward perspective. They see people around them. But I just wanted to give a shout out to Josh. And I wanted to just be able to share how important it is, our words. We can either, pour life-giving words into our children, into our friends, into our husbands, into our wives, and let's build each other up by our words. one negative word, what does it say? It takes like 100 positive words to correct that one negative word inside, and I've had people say negative things to me, and being kind, it's positive criticism or it's corrective criticism. But man, those things can, how we do it is really important, especially when we put ourselves out there and we're doing something new, and then, just to come and, slash us off at the knees, and make you go, oh, maybe I'm doing something wrong. And let's stop that. Let's watch what let's watch the words that we speak to each other, building each other up. Our words, we will give an account one day for every idle word spoken. And what I think that means is all those times that we spoke words that were not building people up. Not that we're to falsely speak things. But yeah, anyhow, have a wonderful day. Bye.